What if I told you that the single force responsible for more missed opportunities, more abandoned dreams, and more wasted lives than any other is not poverty, nor illness, nor even injustice, but fear? That behind the majority of our most destructive decisions, and worse, our failure to make decisions at all, is the trembling, anxious presence of fear whispering in the recesses of the mind. Fear is the great inhibitor, the quiet architect of inaction, and yet, paradoxically, it is also one of the most natural and necessary aspects of the human experience. The Stoics knew this intimately. They did not seek to deny the reality of fear, nor did they pretend that courage meant the absence of it. Instead, they sought to understand it, to strip it of its illusions, and ultimately to master it. Not by running from it, but by turning toward it with the steady gaze of reason. The first secret to overcoming fear with Stoicism is this: understand that fear is neither your enemy nor your identity. It is merely a signal. This might sound simple, but it is a radical shift from how most of us live. To the ordinary mind, fear is fused with identity. I am afraid, therefore I am weak. I am afraid, therefore I must retreat. But the Stoic, disciplined by centuries of philosophical rigor, sees through this illusion. Fear is not a verdict on your character. It is merely a reflex, an ancient biological alarm designed to keep you alive in environments where survival was uncertain and threats were everywhere. It is neither good nor bad. It simply is. As Epictetus reminds us, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. Fear is not the event. It is your interpretation of it. To illustrate this, imagine a man standing at the edge of a precipice, high above a valley. His heart races, his palms sweat, his breath shortens. Does this physiological reaction mean he should retreat? Perhaps. But should he also conclude that he is cowardly, unworthy, incapable of courage? The Stoic would say no. The man's fear is a signal, warning him of a possible danger. But it is his judgment about that signal, what it means, what it says about him, that determines whether he will act wisely or whether he will be ruled by it. The first step in overcoming fear is to separate it from the false narratives we weave around it. The Stoic recognizes that fear is universal, but cowardice is optional. The second secret is equally essential. Distinguish between what is within your control and what is not, and recognize that most of the fears that haunt you pertain to things entirely outside your command. This insight, perhaps the cornerstone of all Stoic practice, is deceptively simple but infinitely liberating. Marcus Aurelius, in his quiet meditations written amidst the chaos of war and empire, reminds us again and again that the only things truly within our power are our own thoughts and actions. Everything else, fate, fortune, the opinions of others, the inevitable decay of the body, is subject to forces beyond our grasp. Consider how much of your fear is rooted in imagined futures, in the dread of possibilities you can neither predict nor prevent. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of death, fear of sickness. These fears are not based on present realities, but on speculative projections into an uncertain future. The Stoic confronts this with disciplined reasoning. If the feared event is within my control, then I need not fear it, for I can act upon it. And if it is beyond my control, then fear is futile, for no amount of dread will alter its course. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. This principle does not make the Stoic apathetic, it makes him free. He is free from the paralyzing grip of fears about circumstances that no human effort can change, and this freedom enables him to act decisively and virtuously within the sphere of what is his to command. It is in this way that the Stoic transforms fear from an obstacle into a guide, an indicator of where he must practice his discipline of distinguishing between what concerns him and what is, in the final analysis, indifferent. The third secret is rooted in perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of Stoic training. Practice voluntary discomfort and exposure to what you fear. The Stoics were not theorists of courage, they were practitioners. They believed that one could not hope to overcome fear merely by intellectual reflection, but by systematic and deliberate confrontation with the very experiences that evoke fear. This practice, known as premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils, involves imagining, contemplating, and in some cases even physically exposing oneself to the hardships and losses that life may impose. Seneca, the Roman statesman and philosopher, engaged in this practice regularly. Despite his immense wealth and political power, he would periodically sleep on the hard ground, wear rough clothing, and eat the simplest of foods. Not because he wished to punish himself, but because he wished to remind himself that he could endure discomfort, that his happiness did not depend upon luxury or comfort, and thus that the loss of these things need not provoke fear. Set aside a certain number of days, Seneca advises Lucilius, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" By voluntarily courting discomfort, the Stoic inoculates himself against the terror of its involuntary arrival. He trains his mind to see that the things he feared, poverty, ridicule, pain, are not as intolerable as his imagination made them out to be. And in doing so, he fortifies his courage, not through reckless bravado, but through intimate familiarity with the very conditions that once seemed unbearable. Let us pause here and reflect. How often do we allow fear to grow unchecked simply because we have never dared to look it squarely in the eye? How often do we, through avoidance, grant our fears a power they do not deserve? The Stoic teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. And mastery requires engagement, practice, exposure. Thus far, we have uncovered 3 essential Stoic strategies for overcoming fear: understanding it as a signal, distinguishing what is within and beyond our control, and engaging in the disciplined practice of voluntary exposure to what we fear. Each of these strategies operates not in isolation, but as part of an integrated philosophical approach to life that seeks not the elimination of fear, as if that were possible, but its transformation from master to servant. Yet there is more. Fear is a hydra with many heads, and the Stoic's task is to sever each with precision and patience. In the next block, we shall explore the remaining secrets, the role of reason in dissolving irrational fears, the power of role models and exemplars in cultivating courage, and finally, the ultimate Stoic antidote to fear, the acceptance of death itself as the most natural and least terrifying of all events. But before we proceed, let us gather what we have learned and hold it close. Fear is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Fear is not a verdict on your worth, but a test of your discipline. And fear, when approached with the steady reason of the Stoic, can be transformed from an impediment into an instrument of your own liberation. Having grasped the foundational Stoic techniques for approaching fear, we now advance further into the philosophical arsenal, moving beyond the immediate confrontation of fear's presence to the higher work of dissolving its influence altogether through the cultivation of reason, exemplars, and, ultimately, the reconciled acceptance of mortality itself. These next secrets represent not merely strategies for resistance, but methods for transcendence, for ensuring that fear does not simply recede, but is transformed into an instrument for virtue and flourishing. The fourth secret to overcoming fear with Stoicism is the cultivation of reason as the sovereign antidote to irrational fears. The Stoics held that reason is the defining characteristic of human beings, the divine spark within us that enables discernment, coherence, and self-governance. They recognized that fear often arises not from objective threats, but from distorted perceptions, unexamined assumptions, and the inherited superstitions of society. Fear thrives in the absence of rational inquiry. It multiplies in the shadows of ambiguity and ignorance. The Stoic's task, therefore, is to shine the light of reason into these dark corners, to interrogate the sources of his fear with calm, deliberate questioning, and to separate the imagined from the real. Consider how often fear flourishes in the realm of possibility rather than actuality. A noise in the night conjures images of intruders. A delay in communication spawns fantasies of rejection or betrayal. A minor physical symptom escalates in the imagination to fatal illness. These are not fears rooted in evidence, but in unchecked inference. The Stoic confronts these reflexes with the disciplined application of reason. What do I know for certain? What is the likelihood of this outcome? What evidence supports this belief? And most crucially, even if the feared event were to transpire, would it truly be as catastrophic as my initial panic suggests? Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, repeatedly counsels the use of reason as a remedy for fear, urging his reader to anticipate fears calmly and to dismantle their exaggerated projections. He writes, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. This is the precise function of reason within Stoic practice, to prune the wild overgrowth of imagination that turns molehills into mountains, to anchor the mind in the present reality, rather than allowing it to be swept away by speculative dread. Through reason, the Stoic transforms fear from an unexamined instinct into a manageable signal, one to be evaluated and responded to with clarity. But reason alone, while essential, is not always sufficient. Thus, we come to the fifth secret, the deliberate cultivation of exemplars, figures whose lives embody courage in the face of fear, serving as models and inspirations for our own conduct. The Stoics understood that human beings learn not only through argument but through example. It is one thing to know, intellectually, that fear can be overcome. It is another entirely to witness, or to vividly imagine, someone confronting fear with dignity and composure. For the Stoics themselves, these exemplars included historical figures like Socrates, who faced his unjust execution with serenity, and whose final moments were characterized not by panic, but by a philosophical discourse on the immortality of the soul. Socrates became, for generations of Stoics, the paragon of fearlessness, a reminder that even death, the ultimate fear for most, could be met without trembling when reason and virtue govern the soul. Marcus Aurelius himself, beset by the incessant threats of war, plague, and political intrigue, found solace and guidance not only in his own reasoning, but in the memory of those who had borne similar burdens before him. In the opening book of his Meditations, he carefully enumerates the virtues he learned from his family members, his teachers, and his predecessors, drawing strength from their examples as he faced the monumental challenges of imperial rule. The practice of seeking exemplars extends to the present day, and the Stoic encourages the cultivation of a mental pantheon of such figures, those who have demonstrated courage, resilience, and serenity in the face of fear. These need not be only philosophers or statesmen. They may include artists, activists, family members, or mentors whose lives bear witness to the possibility of living bravely despite adversity. By contemplating their examples, we internalize the plausibility and desirability of courage, and we remind ourselves that the path of virtue is not merely theoretical, but lived and achievable. Finally, we arrive at the sixth and ultimate secret, the capstone of Stoic practice in overcoming fear, the philosophical reconciliation with death as a natural and inevitable process, and therefore as an event unworthy of dread. All fears, in the Stoic analysis, are ultimately variations of the fear of death. Whether it is the fear of failure, which threatens the death of reputation, the fear of loss, which threatens the death of relationships, or the fear of pain, which threatens the integrity of the body. All are shadows cast by the final cessation that awaits all living things. The Stoic does not deny the reality of death, nor does he seek to evade it through false comforts or denial. Instead, he confronts it directly, steadily and rationally, and in doing so, he robs it of its power to terrify. Marcus Aurelius, reflecting on the transience of life, reminds himself that it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. This profound inversion transforms death from an object of paralyzing fear into a catalyst for purposeful living. The Stoic meditates upon death not morbidly, but as a means of clarifying his values and priorities. Memento mori, remember that you will die, is not a call to despair but to urgency, to authenticity, to the resolute pursuit of virtue without delay. By integrating the reality of mortality into daily reflection, the Stoic ensures that his actions are guided not by the avoidance of death, but by the affirmation of life. Moreover, the Stoic recognizes that death, being a natural process, is neither a punishment nor an aberration. As Epictetus asserts, death and pain are not frightening, but the fear of pain and death is. The distinction here is crucial. It is not the event itself that is to be feared, but the distorted emotional response to it. By dissolving this distortion through rational reflection and philosophical acceptance, the Stoic achieves a state of equanimity that renders him invulnerable to the most primal of fears. Thus, in mastering the fear of death, the Stoic masterfully addresses the root from which all other fears grow. He moves through life with a serenity that is unshaken by the vicissitudes of fortune, a courage that does not depend upon the absence of threat, but upon the presence of virtue. As we gather these final three secrets, the disciplined application of reason, the cultivation of exemplars, and the reconciled acceptance of mortality, we complete the Stoic's arsenal for overcoming fear, together with the initial practices of understanding fear's nature, distinguishing between what is within and beyond control, and the courageous exposure to feared experiences. We have constructed a comprehensive philosophical framework for transforming fear from a master that commands us into a servant that instructs us. But this is not the end of the Stoics' work. In the next blocks, we will explore how these principles are not only to be understood intellectually, but to be applied concretely in the challenges of daily life, in decisions about career, in relationships, in moments of crisis, and in the quiet anxieties that shape our most intimate thoughts. For the Stoic, knowledge is nothing without practice, and virtue is not a possession but a habit forged in the crucible of lived experience. As we proceed, let us remember, fear is not the enemy. Fear is the raw material from which the Stoic forges courage. And the transformation from fearfulness to fearlessness is not a momentary achievement, but an ongoing practice, renewed with each choice, each reflection, and each act of integrity in the face of life's inevitable uncertainties. The Stoics' mastery of fear does not conclude in the sanctuary of theory, but finds its most profound expression in action. In the deliberate and consistent application of these philosophical principles to the everyday circumstances in which fear seeks to reassert its influence. For it is in the unguarded moments of daily life, in the quiet spaces between reflection and response, that fear so often surreptitiously governs decisions, steering the individual away from opportunities for growth, from confrontation with truth, and from the courageous pursuit of the good. The Stoic knows that while the cultivation of reason, the contemplation of mortality, and the emulation of exemplars are indispensable, they must ultimately manifest not only in thought, but in the concrete choices that define a life. Consider, for example, the realm of vocation and career, a domain saturated with fear in its many guises. The fear of failure, of inadequacy, of judgment, of irrelevance. How many men and women, when offered the chance to pursue work that aligns with their passions or values, retreat instead into the safe harbor of mediocrity, cloaked in the rationalizations of practicality, but propelled, in truth, by fear? The Stoic approaches such decisions with disciplined clarity, applying the fundamental distinction between what is within his control, his effort, his integrity, his commitment to excellence, and what is not, recognition, compensation, the volatile tides of economic fortune. He does not allow the fear of failure to deter him from striving, nor does he permit the fear of judgment to warp his authentic course. For he understands, as Epictetus taught, that his true work lies in perfecting his own character, not in securing outcomes that are beyond his dominion. Similarly, in the domain of relationships, fear often masquerades as prudence or self-protection, but operates as a force of limitation and isolation. The fear of vulnerability, of rejection, of disappointment. These are among the most pervasive and paralyzing fears in human life. Yet the Stoic does not allow these fears to dictate the terms of his engagement with others. He recognizes that to love, to trust, and to build meaningful connections necessarily entails risk, and that the avoidance of such risk is not safety, but a kind of living death, a forfeiture of one of life's most profound goods. But the Stoic also tempers this courage with discernment. He does not recklessly expose himself to relationships that are likely to corrupt or destabilize his virtue, nor does he conflate vulnerability with recklessness. Instead, he engages with others from a position of strength and self-sufficiency, offering his affection freely but not compulsively, grounded always in the awareness that his well-being does not depend upon the reciprocation of others, but upon his own alignment with reason and virtue. In moments of crisis, whether sudden accidents, personal betrayals, or broader social upheavals, the Stoic's training in the management of fear becomes most visibly apparent. Where others may descend into panic, indecision, or despair, the Stoic draws upon the habits cultivated through years of philosophical practice. He recalls the fundamental distinction between what he can and cannot control. He summons the examples of those who have borne greater trials with dignity. He reflects upon the inevitability of death and thus the futility of clinging to transient concerns. And, above all, he acts, choosing the response that aligns with virtue, rather than the reaction dictated by fear. Marcus Aurelius, who governed during periods of plague, war, and insurrection, exemplified this Stoic composure in the face of relentless crises. His meditations reveal a man deeply acquainted with fear but unshaken by it, returning always to the central conviction that external events cannot harm the soul unless the soul consents to be harmed. This principle, that the individual retains sovereign control over his moral response regardless of circumstance, is the linchpin of Stoic practice in the management of fear. Even in the quieter realms of daily anxiety, the subtle fears that shape our internal dialogues and influence our choices in ways we barely register, the Stoic remains vigilant. The fear of embarrassment that prevents a man from speaking truthfully in a meeting, the fear of disapproval that compels a woman to compromise her values, the fear of inadequacy that discourages someone from pursuing a new skill or venture. All these quotidian manifestations of fear are subject to the same Stoic analysis and the same disciplined response. The Stoic practices what might be called micro-courage, the consistent, repeated choice to act according to reason and virtue rather than according to fear, even in the smallest matters. For he knows that character is not forged in grand, dramatic moments alone, but in the accumulation of countless, seemingly minor decisions made each day. He cultivates a habitual readiness to confront fear wherever it arises, not with bravado, but with the calm assurance that comes from philosophical preparation. Moreover, the Stoic does not begrudge the presence of fear in his life. He does not view its recurrence as evidence of personal failure, but as an inevitable aspect of human nature, and as a perpetual opportunity for growth. He recognizes that courage is not a static achievement, but an ongoing practice, and that each encounter with fear offers a renewed occasion to exercise this virtue. This understanding frees the Stoic from the debilitating shame that so often accompanies fear. He does not condemn himself for feeling fear, but rather assesses how he responds to it. In this, he models the fundamental Stoic principle that virtue lies not in the eradication of emotion, an impossibility, but in the mastery of one's response to it. Furthermore, the Stoic extends his practice of managing fear beyond his individual life, recognizing its relevance in the civic and communal spheres. He understands that societies, like individuals, are often governed by fear of the outsider, fear of change, fear of decline. These collective fears can lead to policies of exclusion, aggression, or repression, undermining justice and fostering conflict. The Stoic, committed to the cosmopolitan ideal that all human beings are fellow citizens of the rational community, seeks to mitigate these social manifestations of fear by promoting reasoned discourse, mutual understanding, and the cultivation of shared virtue. He does not retreat into private serenity, but applies his philosophical discipline to the improvement of the polis, knowing that the health of his own soul is intimately connected to the health of the community in which he lives. In this way, the Stoic's mastery of fear serves not only personal flourishing, but the broader aims of social harmony and justice. Finally, the Stoics' application of these principles culminates in the integration of fear management into a comprehensive vision of the good life, a life characterized by tranquility, resilience, and purposeful engagement with the world. He does not seek to eliminate fear as though it were an alien intruder, but to incorporate it into his understanding of human nature, and to relate to it with wisdom and compassion. He recognizes that fear, when properly understood and managed, serves a valuable function. It alerts him to potential dangers, signals areas of personal vulnerability that require attention, and offers opportunities for the cultivation of courage. Thus, he does not despise fear but honors it as a teacher, as a force that, when approached rightly, can facilitate rather than obstruct his pursuit of eudaimonia, the flourishing life. This comprehensive application of Stoic principles to the management of fear transforms what might otherwise be a reactive, fragmented approach to life into a coherent, unified practice of living in accordance with nature. It demonstrates that the Stoic's engagement with fear is not confined to isolated moments of crisis but permeates his entire mode of being, informing how he thinks, how he acts, how he relates to others, and how he interprets the meaning of his own existence. As we prepare to continue in the following blocks, let us carry forward this vision of Stoic practice, not as an abstract set of doctrines, but as a living art, a daily discipline that transforms the experience of fear from a source of suffering into a catalyst for virtue and a foundation for the highest human excellence. Now, some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write better every day so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. As the Stoic advances in the practice of overcoming fear, he gradually shifts from reactive discipline to proactive wisdom, employing philosophical anticipation and emotional preparedness to meet future uncertainties with unwavering composure. This evolution marks a profound transformation, from being a person who merely withstands fear to one who welcomes life's challenges as opportunities for the further cultivation of virtue and resilience. The Stoic, having internalized the tools of discernment, exemplarity, and reason, no longer perceives fear as an external force to resist, but as an internal signal to refine his soul, to enhance his judgment, and to deepen his mastery over the passions. This transition is neither accidental nor instantaneous. It is the cumulative result of persistent, deliberate engagement with the practices that define Stoic training: daily reflection, philosophical reading, the cultivation of mindful attention, and, above all, the habitual alignment of thought and action with nature's rational order. For the Stoic, living in accordance with nature does not imply passive acceptance of whatever befalls, but active participation in the unfolding of life's events with wisdom and virtue as guiding principles. One of the key aspects of this proactive orientation is the practice of philosophical anticipation, a refined form of premeditatio malorum, in which the Stoic not only contemplates possible adversities, but rehearses virtuous responses to them. He envisions, for instance, the possibility of losing wealth, health, reputation, or even life itself, not as a morbid indulgence, but as a strategic preparation. He asks himself, if this were to occur, how would I respond in a manner consistent with reason and virtue? In doing so, he inoculates himself against the paralytic effects of fear, ensuring that when such events inevitably arise, he is neither surprised nor disoriented, but prepared to meet them with composure and integrity. This anticipatory stance enables the Stoic to navigate life with a kind of serene detachment. Not apathy, but freedom from the compulsions of fear-driven reactions. He recognizes that fear, left unchecked, leads to hesitation, avoidance, and ultimately a shrinking of the self, a retreat from the full engagement with life's possibilities. But with philosophical anticipation, he enlarges his capacity to act decisively and virtuously in the face of uncertainty. Moreover, the Stoic cultivates emotional preparedness, a readiness not only to think rightly about feared events, but to feel rightly in their presence. He understands that emotions arise swiftly and often involuntarily, shaped by deep-seated evolutionary and cultural patterns. Thus, he does not seek to suppress or deny the initial surge of fear, but to moderate its course through reason and habituation. He practices what modern psychology might call emotional regulation, but what the Stoics articulated centuries ago as the art of ascent, the capacity to withhold immediate agreement from impressions that would otherwise dictate impulsive responses. When fear arises, the Stoic does not immediately assent to the judgment that the feared event is bad or intolerable. Instead, he subjects the impression to rational scrutiny. Is this truly harmful to my character? Does it impede my ability to act virtuously? Or is it merely an indifferent, to be endured with equanimity? Through this disciplined process of withholding assent, the Stoic prevents fear from escalating into panic or paralysis, transforming the emotional landscape from one of volatility to one of stability and poise. As this capacity for proactive engagement with fear matures, the Stoic's relationship with fear undergoes a qualitative shift. He no longer perceives it solely as a signal of threat, but increasingly as a signal of opportunity. A prompt indicating where further growth is possible, where virtue can be strengthened, where complacency can be challenged. Fear becomes a compass, pointing not to what should be avoided, but to what must be confronted for the sake of becoming fully human, fully rational, fully free. For example, the Stoic might notice a lingering fear of public speaking, of expressing unpopular truths, or of pursuing a risky but meaningful endeavor. Rather than interpreting this fear as a reason to retreat, he recognizes it as an invitation to expand his competence, his courage, his authenticity. He asks, what aspect of my character remains undeveloped here? What philosophical resources can I bring to bear to transcend this fear? In this way, the Stoic transforms fear into a catalyst for self-transcendence, for the perpetual refinement of his moral and intellectual capacities. This proactive approach also extends to the cultivation of a broader philosophical worldview that reframes the significance of fear within the cosmic order. The Stoic contemplates the rational structure of the universe, the logos, that permeates all things, ordering them according to necessity and providence. Within this vast interconnected whole, his individual fears, though subjectively intense, are relativized, understood as minute disturbances within an infinitely larger, rationally ordered system. Marcus Aurelius, reflecting on this perspective, writes, "The universe is transformation. Life is opinion." This recognition allows the Stoic to situate his fears within a context that diminishes their apparent magnitude and urgency. He understands that whatever befalls him is part of a larger natural process, indifferent to his personal preferences, but not inimical to his rational flourishing. By aligning his will with the necessity of nature, the Stoic finds peace not in the elimination of fear, but in its subordination to a higher order of understanding. Furthermore, The Stoic acknowledges that proactive mastery of fear requires not only individual effort, but engagement within a community of practice. While the Stoic prizes autonomy and self-sufficiency, he also recognizes that virtue is most effectively cultivated in the company of others committed to similar ideals. In the Stoic community, members challenge one another to confront their fears, to hold one another accountable, to model the courageous responses that reinforce collective resilience. This communal dimension of Stoic practice provides a powerful antidote to the isolation that fear often engenders. Fear tends to isolate, to convince the individual that he is uniquely vulnerable, uniquely inadequate, uniquely alone. But within the Stoic community, whether in the ancient gatherings of philosophical schools or in contemporary circles of philosophical inquiry, the individual finds solidarity, encouragement, and exemplars whose courage inspires his own. The Stoic also integrates the proactive mastery of fear into his daily reflective practices, ensuring that the philosophical principles he espouses are not left dormant, but are continually activated and refined. In the evening, he reviews his actions of the day, asking, "Where did fear influence my choices? Did I retreat where I should have advanced? Did I distort my perception of an event because of fear? How might I respond more virtuously in similar situations in the future?" This practice of nightly examination reinforces the Stoic's commitment to self-awareness and to the progressive attenuation of fear's influence over his life. In the morning, he prepares himself for the inevitable challenges of the day, recalling that fear may arise in various forms and resolving in advance to meet it with reason, composure, and courage. This anticipatory reflection fortifies his emotional resilience and sharpens his readiness to act in alignment with virtue regardless of the circumstances he encounters. Through these daily disciplines, the Stoic embodies the ideal of prosophe, attentiveness, the vigilant awareness of his own inner life and the external forces that seek to perturb it. This sustained attention ensures that fear does not slip past his defenses unnoticed, but is consistently recognized, examined, and integrated into his broader project of living wisely and well. As the Stoic moves further along this path, he comes to embody a distinct presence, a demeanor characterized by calm, clarity, and steadfastness that others readily perceive and often admire. This presence is not the product of Stoic suppression but of Stoic integration, a wholeness achieved through the harmonious alignment of thought, emotion, and action under the governance of reason. Others may marvel at the Stoic's apparent fearlessness, interpreting it as a natural temperament or an inborn trait. But the Stoic knows that it is neither of these. It is the fruit of rigorous philosophical labor, of countless moments of reflection, practice, and courageous choice. It is an achievement, not a gift, a cultivated excellence that remains open to all who are willing to undertake the demanding but rewarding work of self-mastery. Thus, the Stoics' proactive engagement with fear culminates in a life marked not by the absence of fear, but by the presence of courage, not by the avoidance of risk, but by the embrace of meaningful challenges, not by the elimination of vulnerability, but by the transformation of vulnerability into strength. As we prepare to proceed to the final block, we carry forward this vision of the Stoic life as one of proactive wisdom, where fear is no longer an adversary to be defeated, but a companion to be understood, integrated, and ultimately transcended in the service of a flourishing life. In the concluding reflections, we will synthesize these practices into a coherent model for living, that is not merely free from fear, but animated by purpose, resilience, and philosophical joy. In the final stage of the Stoics' mastery over fear, he transcends the confines of personal discipline to cultivate a state of serene confidence that permeates his entire way of being. This confidence is not a reckless bravado nor an ignorant defiance of danger, but a quiet assurance rooted in the consistent application of philosophical principles, a life lived in alignment with reason, and an unwavering commitment to virtue regardless of circumstance. Here, the Stoic no longer perceives fear as an internal adversary to be combated, but as a natural phenomenon, anticipated, understood, and ultimately rendered powerless to dictate his choices or distort his character. At this point in his philosophical maturation, the Stoic experiences a profound shift in identity. He ceases to define himself in opposition to fear, as one who must constantly guard against it, and instead becomes one whose actions are guided so firmly by reason and virtue that fear is simply irrelevant to his deliberations. The question is no longer, "What do I fear?" but "What is the right thing to do?" In this decisive reorientation, the Stoic achieves the epitome of human freedom, autonomy over his inner life, liberation from the tyranny of passions, and a steadfastness of purpose that no external force can disrupt. This fearless way of life is characterized first by tranquility, a state of inner peace that arises not from the absence of challenges, but from the mastery of the self. The Stoic is tranquil not because he has eliminated all sources of potential distress, but because he has trained his mind to interpret events through the lens of rational judgment, distinguishing clearly between what is within his power and what is not. His tranquility is thus not fragile, contingent upon favorable circumstances, but robust, sustained by the unshakable foundation of philosophical wisdom. Such tranquility manifests in the Stoic's response to adversity. When confronted with loss, he does not wail in protest but accepts the event with equanimity, recognizing that all external goods are by nature transient and that his true good, his virtue, remains intact. When faced with physical danger, he does not panic but calmly assesses the appropriate course of action, neither courting death recklessly nor clinging to life desperately. When confronted with social censure or misunderstanding, he does not retreat into bitterness, but continues steadfastly along the path dictated by his reason and conscience. This unwavering composure in the face of fear-inducing circumstances is not a suppression of emotion, but a disciplined channeling of it. The Stoic does not deny the initial physiological or psychological stirrings of fear, but swiftly subjects them to the scrutiny of reason, allowing only those emotional responses that are consonant with virtue to take root and bear fruit in action. This emotional regulation is not an affectation, but the result of sustained philosophical training, a testament to the transformative power of the Stoic method. In addition to tranquility, the fearless Stoic life is marked by purposeful engagement with the world. The Stoic does not retreat into self-absorbed detachment, but recognizes his role as a rational and social being within the cosmic order. He understands that the fulfillment of his nature entails participation in familial, civic, and professional relationships, and he approaches these roles with a sense of duty and generosity. His fearlessness enables him to engage in these relationships without the distorting influence of possessiveness, insecurity, or the need for validation. He loves others freely, acts justly, and contributes constructively to society, all while maintaining his independence of judgment. Moreover, the Stoic's fearlessness empowers him to pursue noble projects and to confront systemic injustices without succumbing to the paralyzing fear of failure or reprisal. He understands that while he may not control the outcomes of his efforts, he retains full control over his commitment to act virtuously. This insight emboldens him to advocate for justice, to defend the vulnerable, and to challenge corruption, all without fear of personal loss. His courage is thus not confined to private resilience, but extends to public integrity, embodying the Stoic ideal of the philosopher-statesman who serves the common good with wisdom and fortitude. Central to this fearless life is the Stoic's acceptance of mortality as a defining feature of human existence. Having reflected deeply on the nature of death and having internalized its inevitability, the Stoic regards each day as a gift and an opportunity to live in accordance with his principles. This memento mori perspective does not engender nihilism or despair, but infuses his life with a sense of urgency and meaning. He understands that his time is limited and that procrastination in the pursuit of virtue is the most grievous of errors. Thus, the Stoic seizes each moment with intentionality, cultivating his character, fulfilling his duties, and savoring the simple joys of existence without fear of their eventual cessation. His acceptance of death liberates him from the pervasive anxieties that afflict those who cling to life as though it could be preserved indefinitely. For the Stoic, death is not an annihilation but a natural transition, no more to be feared than the changing of the seasons. The culmination of the Stoic's mastery over fear is further expressed in his teaching and example to others. Having walked the arduous path from fearfulness to fearlessness, the Stoic recognizes his responsibility to guide those still ensnared by fear's illusions. He does not preach dogmatically, but offers his life as a testament to the possibility of human flourishing through philosophical practice. His calm in adversity, his courage in the face of risk, and his unwavering commitment to virtue serve as a silent yet powerful invitation for others to embark upon their own Stoic journey. He understands that fear is a universal human experience, and that many suffer under its weight without the benefit of philosophical tools to manage it. Thus, he approaches others with compassion and patience, offering counsel, modeling resilience, and fostering communities of mutual support in the pursuit of wisdom. In this way, the Stoic's mastery over fear contributes not only to his own tranquility, but to the collective flourishing of those within his sphere of influence. As we reflect upon this culmination of Stoic practice, it becomes evident that the conquest of fear is not a peripheral aspect of Stoicism, but its very heart. For to live in accordance with nature, as the Stoics exhort, is to live with the courage to face reality as it is, without distortion, without evasion, and without despair. It is to embrace the finitude of human life, the uncertainty of external events, and the inevitability of hardship, all while maintaining a steadfast commitment to reason and virtue. The Stoic path is demanding. It requires sustained effort, rigorous self-examination, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself and the world. But it is also profoundly liberating, offering a mode of existence in which fear no longer dominates, but serves as a catalyst for growth, as a reminder of what is essential, and as a guide toward the highest human potentials. In this fearless life, the Stoic finds not only personal serenity, but also a deep alignment with the rational order of the cosmos. He lives harmoniously within the vast web of natural causes and effects, accepting his place within it with gratitude and humility. His freedom is thus not an escape from nature, but a joyous participation in it, guided by the understanding that while he does not control all that happens, he always controls how he responds. As we conclude this exploration of the Stoic secrets for overcoming fear, let us carry forward the recognition that fear, though powerful, is not invincible. Through the disciplined cultivation of reason, the intentional confrontation of feared experiences, the modeling of virtuous exemplars, the acceptance of mortality, and the consistent application of philosophical principles in daily life, we can transform fear from a source of suffering into a source of strength. This is the promise of Stoicism, not the eradication of all emotional disturbance, but the attainment of a life in which emotions serve rather than sabotage, in which fear alerts but does not paralyze, and in which the individual stands free, courageous, and unwavering in the face of whatever fortune may bring. Thus, armed with these 6 secrets, the Stoic steps forth into the world not as one shielded from all harm, but as one prepared to meet all experiences, joyous or tragic, familiar or alien, welcome or unwelcome, with the serene confidence of one who knows that the good life is not a life without fear, but a life in which fear is mastered by wisdom, transformed by virtue, and transcended by the unwavering pursuit of the good. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.